Welcome back to Let's Talk About Labor, where we explore the real world challenges and solutions related to farm labor across U.S. agriculture. In this episode, we'll focus on recent proposed changes to the H-2A program and strategies farmers are using to navigate these changes. We're thankful once again for the support of our partner organizations, including the Southern Risk Management Education Center, GAP Connection, the USDA Specialty Crop Research Initiative, the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, Department of Labor and Workforce Development, and the University of Florida Farm Labor Supervision Certification Program. My name is Margarita Velandia, and I'm a professor in the Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics at the University of Tennessee. Today, we're excited to welcome our guest, Linda Pryor, co-owner of Hilltop Farm WNC LLC. Thank you for joining us today, Linda. We're looking forward to learning from your experiences.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Linda, can you give us a brief overview of your operation from how long you've been in business, how many employees do you have, what crops do you guys grow, and where do you sell those products?
Yes, our farm began in 1939. My husband's grandfather moved to the property then. Then it began as a dairy and transitioned over the years a few times. Today, our primary crops are apples and corn, and we also do some hay and cattle. Our apples are grown for a variety of purposes. Markets change every season, so growing to meet the highest standards enables us to be flexible for where they're going to end up going. We sell a lot for processing that goes into other products, applesauce, baby food, components of apple flavored things. And then we do a lot of fresh slices, and those are where the apple is whole with the skin on, and then the machine slices it and it goes into individual packages. So, like what you would see for food service, like in a kid's meal or in the grocery store where they sell the sliced apples. Our corn is for animal feed, and we sell it to a feed mill that then adds other ingredients and makes their own feed. The hay that we grow is for our cattle, and then we also sell to others locally. Then we also have direct to buyer beef, and that is where our cattle go. For me, in addition to farming, I do farm full time, but I do a lot of advocacy. And it seems that I don't really know how it happened, but that labor really became my focus. And so I spend a lot of time working on that too, when I'm not working on the farm. We have a mix of both domestic and H-2A employees. And I think, like any family farm, family that works with you is important. So there are 5 of us that work together that are related. And then we have one full-time employee that's been with us for several years. We use about 10 to 14 local people seasonally that help with pruning our apple orchards, and then about 20 H-2A employees during our harvest season for apples. So throughout the year, we have a total of about 40 employees in some capacity, but they aren't all at the same time.
Excellent, Linda. And that second hat that you wear, like your side gig, as I call it, is one that caught my attention because definitely this episode is talking about some of those recent changes in H-2A program. And I think it's not for granted that you end up in that position, given that your business is a very labor intensive business, right? So,
Yes.
given your expertise and experience, I would like you to briefly discuss what you know currently, and for our listeners, of course, the, the time that we're recording this episode, things might change in the future. So keep that in mind, and Linda probably is going to emphasize that point too. But could you briefly discuss what you know about the recent changes to the H-2A program and how these changes are impacting your operation?
Yes. So as you stated, the changes are fluid and you know, interim at this point, and I hope that they become final. So there are things that are changing, and I think that we'll see more changes in the very near future. But as of today, where we USDA announced back in the fall of 25 that they were no longer going to be using the Farm Labor Survey, and then it would no longer be used to determine the adverse effect wage rate for H-2A. That was a huge win. I had been advocating for years that the Farm Labor Survey wasn't a good resource to use to determine that wage because the data was inaccurate. It was a voluntary survey. It was sent to a small group, and even with the small group, there was not a really good response rate. And so estimations were used to fill in the missing data. And whatever the rate is going to be, we want it to be based on accurate data. So that was a huge win in that they weren't going to use that anymore. So since it wasn't going to be used, something had to be done quickly. So that was followed with U.S. Department of Labor filing an interim final rule, and that was released in October of 25. And that was a unique situation because typically when rules are introduced, then there's a comment period before they go into effect. This went into effect immediately with the comment period coming after. And that is a sign that it was an urgent situation because that's when things are done in that order. So I think that really highlights the importance of this. They received a lot of comments and as of now are still going through those comments before it moves forward. So for my farm, the H-2A program is essential for us for apple harvest. But it had come to the point in the last couple of years, the adverse effect wage rate increases were too much. And they were far outpacing any increases that we were receiving for our apples. So in just the last couple of years, our rate for North Carolina had increased about 50%, and the most that we were receiving for any of our apples that we were selling in that same period of time was about 20%. So we knew that, you know, that was not going to work out long term and that it was going to become unsustainable. But we also depend on the program. So what do you do? We became concerned about what we could do, trying to brainstorm ideas, but there just aren't enough people locally that want those seasonal jobs. It also kept us from expanding orchard. We have property that we could add new orchard on, but that would mean more employees. And there are varieties of apples that we are interested in growing, but they would be even more labor intensive than what we're growing now. And so all of those things would factor into, our personal farm decisions. So I'm extremely thankful for the recent changes. One of the things that were recognized in that was the cost of housing. Um, I'm no different than a lot of other places in the country, and housing is expensive. Rent here is expensive. And that was one of the things when we began using the H-2A program, we actually had to delay a year using it because we didn't have housing ready. And so to use the program, you have to provide housing, and that's a huge expense. And so with this interim rule, it does recognize that we are providing housing and compensates for that. So it's more of a total compensation package versus just that hourly rate. I think using the Bureau of Labor Statistics data is going to yield better results, more accurate results for the wage than what we were seeing with the Farm Labor Survey. But again, it is still just interim. So that continues to make me nervous. I want it to become final and be permanent so that we can depend on that and that we know what to count on. Because, like I said, there are things that we would do for our farm as far as growth and expansion that would really help our business. But I'm optimistically cautious about doing those things because it is still interim right now.
Excellent, Linda. That was a great explanation of how you rely on that H-2A program. And I love the figure that you put about how that labor cost, at what rate it has increased versus the prices you were receiving for those apples. And so that's a really great picture of how that was not sustainable in the long run. Now, could you share with us some strategies you are using to navigate these changes? Because Just to put you in context, I know, for example, in Tennessee, that new interim rule is gonna lower that wage rate. So we're at 1587, and this new rate will have like those two levels, right? The entry level and the more experienced worker, and that reduces the wage rate. And then you have the housing deduction, right? So some growers here are like not clear, or I'm not going to talk for them, but I received some questions from agents saying, well, they don't know how to navigate this, right? The fact that the wage rate was higher that last year, this new interim rule is allowing you to pay like a lower wage rate, which is kind of like better for you guys. But I want to hear from you is like, if you have not thought about it, maybe you already have, how are you navigating, or what strategies are you using to navigate these changes?
Definitely thought about it. When the interim rule came out in October, we were in the middle of apple harvest. So our H-2A employees were still here. We were able to have conversations with them. We had multiple conversations with them before they left, and we have a very high return rate, almost 100%. So it's the same people that are coming back year after year. And we've been very transparent and had conversations for years. And so they were aware of the fact that the wage was, exceeding what was going to be sustainable long term. And I think what is important to realize about the H-2A program is, you know, as a farm, as an employer, I have to apply to participate. The employee also has to apply. They can choose what type of work they want to do, where they want to go. So even if I were to say, these are the employees that I've had, that's who I want to use, they have the option to say, no, I don't want to come back to work for you this year. And that's totally their choice. And so since we do have the same people coming back every year and we have been able to have conversations all along, they were very aware of the increase and what that was looking like long term, that, we may not be able to bring as many people next year. And we would have that conversation. And, we even had conversations where we'll just don't pay as much if that's the case, because I want, maybe my brother comes too, and who's gonna not get to come. And well, we can't do that. We have to pay, what we are required to pay as the minimum. And so they were very understanding of that. And I think having those conversations was huge, because it wasn't a shock to anyone. When they come back this year, it won't be surprising, because we've had those conversations for so long, and we had multiple conversations before they left after this interim rule was released. What I think is best about it and most excited about is, previously we were at 16.16 an hour. Um, that was the max. We could not compensate someone based on, coming to work for us for their longevity, or there was no I guess now we have the opportunity to actually act as most employers do, and have, even a scale of, if you've come back this many years, you're going to make more, and if you're brand new, you're going to make less, like in a lot of occupations. We didn't have that option before, and now we do. So I think looking at it, that the minimum is just that, the minimum. It is the floor, not the ceiling. And so employees can be compensated appropriately. And we have that room now where we didn't have that room before. And I think that that is really important. It's important as an employer to be able to do that. And it's important for employees when they are deciding which farm they want to work for. Just as anybody that's, job searching, they're going to look at what's being offered, and we're not just looking at that one set price anymore. So I think that's huge. But communication is huge. And just because the rate has decreased doesn't mean that's you still have the choice. And if you want to pay the previous year's rate, you can do that. And I think that's what's great about it, is as long as you are using that minimum, you can go above it as much as you want to. Adding the compensation for the housing in makes a huge difference, especially for farms like mine that are using local employees and H-2A employees, because the local employees aren't having anything provided for housing. They have their own housing. They are responsible for all of that. And so this puts everybody on a more level playing field. And that was part of what the adverse effect wage rate was supposed to do. It was not supposed to adversely affect local workers in any way. And so recognizing that housing uh, does that and makes it more of a level playing field.
I absolutely love your answer, Linda, in terms of clarity. You talk about two or three things that are very important. One of them, communication, right? If you have a relationship with those workers, they're aware they value is not, I mean, of course, it's about the wage rate you are paying and how much you are paying to them, but also the relationship you have with them. And the better relationship you have with them, the easier it is for you to communicate what's going on in your farm and how those changes are going to impact your operation and their livelihoods, right? So one
Right.
thing I absolutely love the way you explained that. Also, the opportunity that is presented with this change, right? The ability to compensate people for experience, skill, longevity, and it's an opportunity you didn't have before. And the third one, the ability to deduct that additional added value, which is the housing, which is a cost for you, but it's also a benefit for them, right? So
Right.
I think I hope I summarize well the three things you emphasize, and I think that's very going to be very helpful for our audience. Linda, again, I cannot thank you enough for joining us and sharing your knowledge and experience in this episode. Thank you so much for your time, Linda.
Thank you.